Welcome to the Conscious Parenting panel on Amplifying Her Voice Mother's Day Summit. We're super excited to have this conversation with all of you, and we are encouraging engagement. So if you have any questions in the chat or the Q&A, we will be keeping track of that so we can address that. But first, we're going to kind of do a round robin with the panel and go through some questions to give some information about conscious parenting if that is new to you. Or to, even if it's not new, we always pick up new tidbits along the way, hearing from different voices and different experiences. So I'm going to introduce the panel. We'll go around, let's go clockwise. And I will go last, so I will pass it to Claire. So Claire, why don't you introduce yourself, give a little information so people know where you're located, how many kids you have, and just how you have gotten involved in conscious parenting.
Yeah, hi everyone. I am Claire Chetty. I am located in California, Santa Barbara area, and I am a mama of 4 young adult kids. Can you say that a 30-year-old is a young adult anymore? So,
sure.
Yeah. So anyway, she's my stepdaughter. She's 30. I have a son who's 23, soon to be 24, a son who's 21, and a daughter 18. And so I began my journey when my kids were younger. And when I first started my journey, there wasn't such a term as conscious parenting, you know? So I guess I would say from my experience and my journey, I'm still on the journey of conscious parenting. And it started with me just becoming aware of the patterns I needed to change, finding myself in patterns of anger and frustration that were not serving me or my kids well. And it's just, to me, conscious parenting is awareness. It's, having a presence and being able to take ownership of what's going on for me so that I can show up for my kids. And so it's a journey I started then, and one I'm still on now. And now that there is actually a term, conscious parenting is amazing, and love being able to work with mamas and parents and helping them in that journey as well. So glad to be here.
Great. Thank you, Claire. Lydia, let's move on to you. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lydia Benham. I am the host of the Whole Modern Parent podcast and co-founder of Whole Modern Parent. I have 2 little ones. I have a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. They're actually a little over the half, but it's like, I don't know. I quit counting months after the first kid. So, yeah, so I'm really excited to be here. There's amazing women up on this panel. Conscious parenting has been a journey. I know that a couple of the women in here, when we talked before, kind of discussed how it is like a journey. I will say it hasn't always been linear. It's been kind of zigzaggy at times. And for me, I will say it's definitely contributed to me feeling more of a whole person. I think it's just when you have kids and you get spun. And I was definitely in an industry that was very, very fast paced before having kids. And, staying up all night working and less than 24-hour deliverables was like the norm, and kind of just being able to figure out what a new life looks like with kids and my priorities. And for me, kind of the definition of conscious parenting is knowing what I need with kids in my life, and kind of restructuring. So yeah, the journey has been amazing, and I'm still on it. And I'm really glad to be on this panel today with you, amazing women. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lydia. Irene, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm Irene Mckenna. I'm a parenting and relationship coach for moms, and I'm the host of the Thrive in Motherhood podcast and the founder and creator of the Blissful Mom Collective. And my boys are now 8.5. I'm still sticking with those halves because I'm not ready to give it up and say he's closer to 9, but in almost 10, which is unbelievable to me. And conscious parenting for me began not linear and continues to be not linear, but it was because things were a mess around here. I felt wholly unprepared to navigate parenting from a place other than attempting to completely control. And that, of course, is not a fun place to be. It is a lot of frustration. It is a lot of even bigger behaviors is the kiddos resist. And my older son, almost 10, was really my catalyst, my guiding light to show me all of the ways that I needed to look within. And that's really what conscious parenting is. It's an awareness of the answers being within. It's an awareness of our programs and our stories and how they play in. It's an awareness of how we project onto everyone else what we need. And it's not that we live in this place of consciousness all the time, but that we build the capacity to return to consciousness. It's questioning our thoughts and beliefs. It's questioning our judgments and labels that we place on everything. It's learning to give ourselves what we need. It's learning to regulate our emotions. It's learning to set healthy boundaries and come back to our sense of worth and worthiness to feel really freaking good in this role of being a mom. So that's what it is to me.
I love that. So I'll give a little bit about myself. I am Tia Fagan. I'm located in Wisconsin, and I'm a conscious parenting and authenticity coach. So I support parents and non-parents because this journey of consciousness is not just in parenting, but oftentimes our children are our biggest teachers and reflect back exactly what you were discussing, Irene and everyone. And so for me, I have two daughters. I have twin daughters, and they are now 20. They'll be 21 in a few months. I'm not counting halves anymore, but we are getting in the last 3 months before I have two 21-year-olds, which is quite amazing to me. And my journey to conscious parenting, very much similar. My kids really woke me up because they were mirroring back to me the parts within me that I needed to examine, explore, and question. And I did not come to conscious parenting until they were in middle school because it wasn't really around either. And we didn't have a lot of, there were forums, but there wasn't a lot of internet access and availability. And I had been on my own journey of self-discovery, going within, exploring, questioning, looking at patterns and roles that I played. But I did not directly put it into my parenting until I came across Dr. Shefali's work. And once I read her book, The Conscious Parent, it was like this missing puzzle piece in my life and in my parenting. And from that moment forward, I describe it as it was a huge exhale for me. Like, oh, wait, I'm not necessarily a bad parent when I would get into control or trying to, manipulate and look at behaviors and try to fix things, because it never felt good to me. It allowed me permission to go, oh, well, this is because of conditioning of culture and how I was raised in other areas. So for me, conscious parenting is, like you said, going within, being curious, and then attuning and matching my children where they're at. Even though they're adult children, we still have a parent relationship. It shifts and change. And Claire, who has older kids, we've talked about this before, but you're still the parent, and they still teach us and they still give us lessons. So we can continue talking a little bit about conscious parenting, or we can move on to the next section. What would everyone like to do before? And then I'll just welcome other people as well. Do you want to continue talking about just some more basics of conscious parenting? Perhaps even what was one of the most empowering moments each of us had on the journey? How does that sound?
I will chime in here. So I think something for me, and I think it's hard because we're not really given like a guidebook on parenting, right? So like for me, what my journey looked like. And I'm just like a learner. That's like a natural thing for me. So I wanted to like learn everything. And of course, like I was, the person who had like a, 60-page birth plan that I had typed out and all of the above. But there's a lack of planning for parenting. And I think a lot of that is kind of like the matrescence period, which is like you birthing as a mother as well, which is complex depending on like, our history. Because something that I wish I would have been told is that I was going to bring all of my history into my parenting. And I feel like conscious parenting, and then also just like the theory behind positive parenting as well, it ties into all of that. And it's a holistic learning and it's a holistic parenting. And it feels so good because the dots are so connected, because there's some ways of parenting out there and like that just around like discipline, and they're very hyper focused on like specific bulletins, but none of that really feels good, because it's like you still have to fix like well, not fix. I'm not saying no one's broken here, right? We all have our stuff. But we have these things that we carry in that are going to have effects and play parts and dynamics and relationships and like parenting styles and things like that. And also, no one talks about the fact that you are inherently given a parenting style just by how you were parented as. And so it's really hard because I have complicated relationships with my parents. And for some reason, I thought just because like I was away from them, like they were not affecting my life, until you really go down this deeper kind of thinking and thought process. And what I love about it is that it is such a holistic approach, because you have to tap into some things about yourself and you have to get really real with yourself. And you have to be really, really honest. And so it's just so clarifying and so empowering for me. Kind of just going on the path of conscious parenting was me being in the driver's seat of my life. It definitely helped me feel like, and I know control is like this weird, thing we all want to control, but we can't control anything. But just, it does make you feel like you're in control of like your life and your decision making, and you're in the power of defining like your motherhood and your parenthood. And conscious parenting taps into that. And I think people don't have, because it is a vast concept, and because the definition can kind of be determined a little bit by like what your experience of going through the process is, that I think some people get confused, but it's very, very life-changing. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
It is. And it not only, bringing up you inherit the parenting patterns from your parents and their previous generations, is when we shift into more of the conscious parenting approach and looking within, then we are shifting parenting paradigms forward for future generations. So it's not just that empowering for us, it's knowing we're empowering our children to make those decisions for themselves, because we're modeling that for them. And it's such a beautiful, think of it as a gift for our kids that we're giving them, not just to ourselves, but also for them in future generations.
Yeah. And if I can build on that with a personal example. So I did, as I said in the beginning, it was very much about control. And it was very much about my validation as a mom that I was doing a good job was tied to my child's behavior. It still is. I'm still noticing ways I'm trying to control things because I'm so tied into that, because it was so prevalent when I was growing up. But what conscious parenting and healing myself has allowed is this awareness of my boys' experience and being able to hold presence for them. And so one example was I have my almost 10-year-old, like I said, he's been my catalyst for growth. And he is, we say like spirited child or whatever. He's just very convicted in his beliefs and who he is. And what came up, and he was very, to use old labels, very defiant, very, fought control at every turn, obviously, because I was trying to control. But so my tendency was to push away, right? Like, why is he making this so hard for me? He's such a jerk. And so what it ended up though, is by working on myself, I was able to hold presence for him. And there was one day where he was just in his room and he's just having a lengthy, big emotional experience. And I was then able to go in and hold space and see him in a way, what was behind that. And I simply said to him at one point, he was saying like, just send his brother, just send him away. Nobody will miss him. And I finally was just like, I was able to say, are we talking about him or are we talking about you? Do you feel like you're not loved? And it was like a ghost came across his face. Like he's just like, he just felt so seen for the first time ever, because I was able to, because my tendency in the past was to be like, oh, you feel this way, or and I just literally repeated back word for word of what he was saying to me without labels, without judgment. And he was able to just be seen for the first time. And since that moment was almost a year ago, our conversations have gone so much deeper, where he's been able to express all of these limiting beliefs that he thinks there's something wrong with him. because he has anxiety. He thinks he's not smart because he struggles with focus. So he's able to share all this with me. So when we talk about the ripple effect, here he is, and at 9 years old, I'm shifting limiting beliefs that he's not going to be like, I mean, he's, as I say, you know, as I'm sure we all say to our clients, like, it's not that we prevent our kids from having their limiting beliefs. Like, they're going to have their own stuff. What I see it as, we normalize this healing journey. We normalize understanding ourselves deeply. And by healing myself and parenting in this way, I'm able to bring awareness to him at 9. So maybe he's not like 39 sitting there having a coach or a therapist where he's trying to figure out what these limiting beliefs are.
Definitely. I love that story because he felt seen and heard and accepted in the mess. And that's the beauty, because it's easy to love our kids when they are behaving well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And feel proud. But when they are being defiant, or, you know, I don't believe that there's defiant children either. It's
exactly,
you know, but just to explain it, that's when they need us the most. And to be seen and heard and loved in the mess is what we all crave and need. And
that's when his behavior changed, right? Like, it was after that I would ask him to do something, and like, he would go do it. And I'm like, whoa, right? Like, it's not, we always are so focused on the behavior and changing the behavior and getting cooperation, which is another word for saying, do what I want when I want it.
Exactly.
But we're so focused on that what we don't see is it's the connection that we build when somebody feels heard and validated, so that they care about us in a way that has them do the thing that we're asking. They don't do it because we tell them to. They do it, like I use the example of my husband all the time. He likes things a little bit more picked up in certain places than I do, but because I value our relationship, I try to honor that. And it's the same way with our kids.
Right. That's beautiful. Claire, did you have something?
Yeah, I want to build on what Irene talking about too, about this journey and in modeling and having these conversations with our kids. I mean, I just recently, the beautiful thing about conscious parenting and the journey of it is that conversation is continuing. And the idea that we are not perfect parents, we are going to mess up. And we're going to find out 23 years down the road that, oh my gosh, I didn't do that very well. And want to like, oh my gosh, I've blown it. I don't get a second chance. But the beautiful thing is this literally just happened to me with my oldest son. And in my journey, I shared it was anger. And so I didn't want to have that angry household. So what I did was I was like, okay, why am I mad? And I did a lot of internal work, which was great. So I was pretty calm, but it literally was just recently that I realized that in my calm, I wasn't fully expressing emotions. And so what happened was we recently had this conversation where I realized that, and I inadvertently created the same anxiety in my children, being afraid of anger, right? Because I didn't really fully express it in a conscious way. I just kind of did it all in here. So that being said, we were having this conversation, and it was kind of the same light bulb for him. Like, he fully, for the first time, felt seen because I acknowledged, like, hey, I didn't do that very well. And I can see how I perhaps denied your reality, because when you would ask me if anything wrong, I'd be like, no, everything's fine. You know, but meanwhile, I'm doing all this work. And he's just like, no, it's not, you know. But so then he actually would like tiptoe around me because he wasn't sure what to do. And so we had this amazing conversation, and he's like, oh my gosh, like, it was like this veil was opened up for him, and it was just a beautiful moment. I'm like, I am so sorry. And he's just like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. Like, so this conversation is happening all the time, this consciousness and awareness and this growth, like, wow, like, I didn't do that very well, but I can now. And the relationship that I built with them, because of the awareness, I can have that conversation with them and help them make sense of what happened. And then, like you were saying, I think, Tia, earlier, they get to carry that forward with knowledge and understanding of what, you know, true for them. So yeah, it is an amazing way to have those experiences with our kids. It's not easy. It hurts. I mean, I was in pain over the idea that I hurt them that way, but having the conversation, being able to help them heal through it was really it was such a gift.
It is. My boys love it. I was just gonna say, my boys love it when I take responsibility, where I was like, I'm seeing that I was doing the best I could and that this actually didn't serve you. It really didn't support you. And they're like, no, it didn't. I'm like, okay, I will take that in. I will take that. I will allow for that. But but it allows them to, you can get things wrong. Like, we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to get this right. Like, even mom gets things wrong sometimes. And then I take responsibility for it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think ownership like years later,
Yes.
like what, but it's still impactful to do that. Yeah.
It's so humbling as well. I mean, just the fact that like we have to kind of come clean with them, but I feel like it makes sense. And it's like, if you think about it, like the previous generation's parenting, like with so much authoritarian structure to it. So, but it doesn't really make sense, especially in like, I mean, because we're building life skills, right? And then we're sending them off into the workplace, and it's actually, I mean, it's tough. If you're working for a boss that does not like own up to their mistakes, that's a toxic relationship. So like, we're just kind of teaching them that toxic relationships are okay, but actually it's not. Like, you need to be with someone or working with someone or working under someone that, can like admit when they're wrong, right? Because everyone's wrong. So it's kind of, and I love like the story, Irene, that you mentioned, just like with your sons, because it all of these experiences, and I like to call them experiences because I feel like, and even like the like infancy stage that I am with my young kids, it's learning. I'm learning a lot about myself, and like where I am with the stage with young kids, I'm learning patience and I'm learning a lot of empathy. I'd say me personally, I didn't come from an empathetic home, and so it's been life-changing for me, because it's actually like just having to do the work with both my daughter and my son, because they're both emotional in different ways, has helped me just interacting with adults. Which it's been life-changing, and it's been an experience, but it's also helped us. And so, I mean, just naturally, I think mothers are kind of more of the safe emotional space than dads, even though, dads these days are, they're just as empathetic at this point. But it has helped us connect on that level. And like, I mean, she's screaming and crying and upset, but like, we're writing it out and it's okay. Like, no one's getting triggered. It just is what it is. It's part of processing, and we just kind of go through the stage together. So for me, like the biggest benefit of really being in control of kind of your parenting and consciously parenting is just being able to connect on the level that, before everyone would go to like different rooms and no one would talk to each other for however long.
Yeah, definitely. And I love too, both, the experiences of kids with different ages is so important, that conscious parenting is applicable at any age, at any time. If it's brand new to you and you have teenagers, it's not too late ever, so if you're feeling disconnected from your kids, or you're not having struggles with big feelings with your children, conscious parenting can help you with this, because you learn how to have, just like you were talking, Claire, how to have bigger feelings that weren't okay. Like for you, it was the anger. Oh, I can't get angry. And then how that transferred over. But as we can be with those big feelings ourselves, we teach our children that they're okay. So just like Irene and Lydia, you had, the kids can have the temper tantrum or the meltdown. It's not so scary anymore. And it's not something we have to fix or change. We just let the waves ride through, and we're there and allow it. Like, hey, that's okay. And we can find other ways to process maybe later. It does. But in that moment, they just need support and guidance that it is okay. And I'm here for you.
And I see even, I mean, this has completely like transformed my relationship with my husband as well. Like, it's conscious parenting. Like, yes, we apply it to our kids. We talk about conscious parenting, but when we learn to honor all of our relationships from this place of consciousness, it transforms all of them. I mean, just last weekend we were doing a home project, and when you do those with your partner, they can turn a little wonky. Well, this time, as he's attempting, I made a couple suggestions that apparently weren't the best. And when he's like, why did you even ask me to do that? And he's like throwing all this blame on me. I simply said, like, I see you. Blaming me makes you feel better about it. It's not, how can I support you? I can take it if that's what you need to do right now, but I don't take it personally at all. And because I'm not triggered, I stay calm in it. He's able to shift out of that as well. And then we can focus on actual, solutions that work in this situation, but it really can transform your relationships, whether it's showing up empowered with a boss, whether it's showing up in your partnership. So it starts, for us, it all began with parenting and that parenting journey. But if we were to ripple that out into all of our relationships, you can see how it completely transforms how we engage, how we interact, how we navigate all of our relationships.
Yeah. And I think I do want to add to that, because I think self-awareness is one of the best things that I have gotten out of this journey. And that has been a piece that has ripple affected in my partnership with my husband, the parenting, and it's also ripple affected to other dysfunctional relationships within my family. But it is interesting just because this having the self-awareness piece, like I know now, and my husband and I just went through this pretty recently, is like when we're tired and we're trying to talk about stuff, that's when we get like bickery. And so now we're like, are we tired? Shut it down. Like, these are the things we're not going to talk about, or we're just going to bed.
Yeah, exactly. Knowing what your capacity is at. Am I, and it's the same with our children. So it's kind of that wider view of behavior is communication. So you're tired and, this is not the time to have those in-depth, potentially difficult conversations, just like with our kids. What else is going on underneath the surface? And if we can understand that it's not just what we see, there's more under the surface, not just with our kids, but with ourselves. And as we start to recognize, oh, you know what, I'm not in the space to have this conversation, or I just don't have the bandwidth, or it's not going to end well. That's honoring yourself and your partner in that situation. So what a gift. And to model that for your children is amazing.
It is. I've had my youngest daughter, as a teenage girl in high school, I found a lot of triggers were coming up for me, and it was just like, whoa, like the high school stuff, and really that self-awareness of being able to separate what's mine and from what's her. My experience is not necessarily going to be her experience. So having that awareness of like, okay, I'm getting triggered, like, oh boy, but because you've had this relationship, there was one time we were talking in my room, we were talking about a pretty heavy topic, and you can feel it. I can feel it coming up, and I'm like going, but it got to a point now where I go, okay, I'm getting triggered. We need to take a break. And she's like, okay. And she leaves and she goes into her room, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my gosh, and I have to do this whole thing. And it's so funny. I text her, I'm like, okay, you can come back now. She come back. I'm like, okay. And we start the conversation, but it's that ability to say, okay, I'm not okay. Like, we need to stop. I mean, even last night we were having a conversation, something going on with her, and she's upset. And so I started to say something. She's like, Mom, I don't want answers right now. I just need you to listen. I'm like, okay, but for a minute there, I'm like, but I'm like, okay, Claire, check it. It's just, she's stating a boundary, right? And so I have to honor that and not impose my thoughts right now, but without conscious parenting, that I think would most definitely have triggered into a thing, and I would have been all hurt. And so super grateful for the ability to do that and have that self-awareness.
And what you stated too, so important, is not taking things personally. So many people think our kids are out to get they get under my skin. They know just what buttons to push. And the reality is, we have the buttons within us that are getting pushed. They didn't put those buttons there. It's because we have that internal pain point that they could say the same thing to someone else and it doesn't trigger them. So they're not intentionally going around like, I'm just going to continue poking the bear. They're just stating what they're stating most of the times. I mean, every now and then we get under another's skin intentionally because we are depleted and not feeling very good. But the vast majority of the time, it is not personal. And so taking that space, like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm getting activated. What is within me? Create that space and go, okay, it's not personal. And it relieves so much pressure. And then you can show up for your kids with that ability to connect from the heart space instead of a defensive energy. And it's so empowering, and to see, especially with teenagers in particular, because it is I personally, I love the teenage years because it
yeah, it's great.
grow myself up a lot and not transfer my own stuff onto them. So it's an amazing time to transform and grow internally.
I want to add something about boundaries, because Claire mentioned that, and I think that's a huge piece of it. Just so a lot of the work that we've done, and I have personally experienced this as well. I think it's hard sometimes culturally, especially if you're someone who's not used to asserting boundaries. It's hard to be given boundaries. And sometimes I've seen that it comes up as triggering. So I think, sometimes that could just be where you're missing the mark, is that it's just someone sometimes asserting a boundary. It doesn't feel good to you because you're just not used to it. And I think a lot of people, we talk a lot about boundaries, we talk a lot about setting them, but we don't talk enough about what it's like to be receiving more boundaries, because the likelihood of, if you're not asserting them, you probably don't know what it feels like and like what that space looks like, and things that it's hard to receive the boundaries without getting triggered as something against you. But I think, as we're seeing this shift, and I've just seen it in like some moms that like are in our community, and then like just some personal friends as well. And I've even seen it in myself, just since I've had kids, I've had to assert a lot of boundaries because my time is very scarce now. And I definitely noticed it was not being received as well by some people, because we just come from a family that doesn't understand boundaries a lot. So it's a space where, you can get triggered, but sometimes you have to just like go through, just the 3 questions. This is a boundary. Am I being triggered because I'm just not used to it or comfortable with this boundary? Is like what they're saying actually going to negatively affect me? Or is it just something that I need to take like some space and process for a second?
Yeah. So let's have a conversation about boundaries then, because I think they're such an important part of conscious parenting, and many of us did not grow up with boundaries. We grew up with hard and fast rules, which are very different than a boundary. So when you think of conscious parenting and you think of setting, and let's add in receiving, and then holding a boundary, because many of us throw those boundaries out, but then don't hold them. So what does a boundary mean to each of you? How do you recognize when to create a boundary, how to hold it, or perhaps you kind of describe some of that, Lydia, what happens when someone puts a boundary on you and what it can stir up within you. So who'd like to talk boundaries first? Because it's a really important one, and it comes up a lot in parenting.
It does. I'll jump in. Sure. So, and this, just to backtrack slightly, it's where we often think that because we grew up in this hard and fast rules and authoritarian style, that it's either that or chaos, right? Like it's either that or there's nothing. And that's where really understanding that conscious parenting, we are a leader for our children, but we're working with them. So boundaries to me are, I like to think that you place a child in like a dark room with like no windows, and there's like there's like 2 doors out, and I'm telling them, I'm giving them the choice of these are the boundaries. And so the way they learn those boundaries, it's like what I'm available for, what I have capacity for, but it's also working within what they're capable of, what they can handle at that moment. So I'm creating this closed container, and it's like, this is the 2 paths, because I'm being a leader, but I'm not moving the walls. I'm not changing the structure of the room, because the way a child relaxes their energy and learns to trust you is by holding these boundaries. Another analogy I like with boundaries is you get on a roller coaster and you pull the bar down, and the attendant before it goes comes and checks all the bars to make sure. You don't want to see that bar give. You want to see that it holds so that you can relax your energy and enjoy the ride. Kids are meant to push boundaries because that's how they learn to trust you. They want to know, if I ask 10 times, 15 times on Sunday, on Thursday, at 7 a.m, at 8 p.m, that the boundary is the same. And so boundaries are being a leader and giving your child direction. And this is, based on the way I look at it, based on like what I value, what I value. So when I talk about like, okay, where we brush our teeth at night, it's not like because I said so. It's the boundary is you can brush them or I can help you brush them, but we value our health and our well-being. So we're going to brush our teeth. So the outcome, the boundary is we're brushing our teeth. That doesn't change. I have flexibility and I can work with you in how we get to that boundary.
Great. Yeah, beautiful. Claire or Lydia?
Okay, I can go, Claire. No, it's hard to follow Irene on that. That was very, very good. That's why Claire didn't go first. I'm just teasing. No, I agree.
I'm trying to find the mute button. I'm like, where's that mute button?
I actually was gonna I mention as well, just like it's an and or kind of approach. Like that, we're really big on that. It's like, you know, we are leaving. You can carry your shoes or you can put them on. I think, and that's where the choice thing comes in for boundaries. And I think also, so something that I think was really hard for me in the beginning, and this might just be like my type A control self, is I did have confusion. I felt like my husband and I needed to have the same boundaries with our kids. So I have detoxed from that, but and I realize now, like, I can have boundaries just that are a little bit different, but they still understand that those are like my boundaries, especially like around bedtime, because bedtime is like, that's mama's time. I do not do like the 10 stories. I am not going to be that parent for them. But their dad is like, he is game all the time. So I think it also kind of having that awareness that like different caregivers or different people can assert different boundaries around a like larger goal, which fits into your family values. Like she was saying within like teeth brushing, right? Like we understand. And I love that you like give like the value and the reason and the why, and then here's the flexibility. So I think that can extend like, you know, flexibility, like depending on what parent, I mean, regardless, the kids are going to bed at some point. Right. And then I think for me also a big one is, and I've noticed, like, you guys, it's so like empowering and amazing feeling when you see your kids, they are doing what like you model. And it's, I mean, so it's good and bad sometimes, especially when they're using it against you, which we've had a couple, but I have seen, so I have to put boundaries around my time and sometimes my availability. And like, I do need like some quiet time, especially just because that's just for me, I just need some quiet time. And I've had to set that with kids, and the kids kind of understand. And like, they even have their quiet spaces. But my 3.5-year-old, she tells me like she needs self-time, and she goes and sits in our bed and reads through her books because she needs to come down. And that's usually after school or things where she has like big activities. So I can see also for me setting boundaries on what my needs are, and, you know, everyone's needs are going to look different. And us kind of as a household respecting that we have to respect other people's needs at certain times. I can see that modeling that allows kids in the household to kind of be able to stand up and put boundaries in place for things that they need and space.
Definitely. Yeah, because just as we hold and create boundaries, our children have the right to do the same. And it's up to us to honor those as well, as long as it's not a safety issue or something to that effect. They are autonomous beings, and they are allowed to have what works for them. And it may not be what we think, but it doesn't make it wrong. So I'm glad you brought that up. Irene, were you going to add something quick? You just unmuted.
I was going to just add quick. The biggest difference that I define between like punishments or consequences, those are done from a reactive state. That's when you are reactive. Boundaries are done from a connected place where you connect first. So you're calm. You're very clear on what the boundary is. You focus on connection, and then you're consistent with it. Where consequences are something we throw out in the moment because we didn't like what our child just did. We're focused, they're past focused. Boundaries are future focused. It's a longer game to set a boundary. Punishments and consequences feel like in that moment, I'm gaining control and I'm getting what I want. Mm-hmm. But at what cost? Boundaries are that longer game. And it's always self-reflection. Just this morning, I'm homeschooling my kids right now. And I was like, oh my God, I'm totally in a control place with that. Like, it's just that awareness, like, because I was feeling all this frustration. So it's when you feel, that's the thing with boundaries, when you feel frustrated over and over again, what is going on for me? Do I need, like you kind of, Lydia, what you said, do I need to set a boundary? Do I need to take better care of me? Because what I realized was I've kind of let a few of my self-care things go. So my capacity to navigate that from a place of connection took a nosedive. So it's really about how we are setting boundaries from a connected, empowered place versus a reactive, angry, irritated, triggered place.
Exactly. Before I pipe in, I know, Claire, you had something you wanted to add.
I'm not sure I can add much more. This is also brilliant, really. But I think boundaries are very, very confusing because people really don't really understand what they actually are. And so usually we'll start with personal boundaries, like for yourself, right? Before you can really enact boundaries for the family. So I try to describe boundaries to people, mom, dads, like boundaries is something that you put in place and what you're going to do to honor it. Boundaries aren't put into place to change someone else's behavior because you literally can't control their behavior, but you can control what you're going to do about it. Not to them, but what you're going to do, So the idea that put in place, when this happens, then I will do X, Y, Z, So, but how do you do that? Like, why? What you all are saying, that what is it that I need? Am I feeling resentful? What am I defensive about? Like, if these things keep showing up, might there be something that you need to put into place for yourself so that you can be more empowered to show up for your kids? I try to explain also like the core values, figuring out what's really important to you. And then I kind of envision it like an umbrella, if you will, and you just kind of, the different sections of the umbrella. You're holding the umbrella, it's above you, and you got all your values in that. And that's what's really important to you. That's what you base your family mission on, if you will. But expectations are how you meet them. And so oftentimes we're not real clear on what those expectations are. Everyone's going to do it like we do. But that's where their boundaries and their unique abilities and who they are coming to play, and allowing them that room to move to meet those boundaries. So kind of like what Irene talking about with the room, like you're not moving the wall, but you're giving them the room to get there. So it's just how you envision it yourself. But so that's all I can really add to it, because everything is so good what everybody's saying. But it really does start with yourself, and it's super personal. I mean, for an example, a boundary that I had that was really important to me is that my children greeted people when they walked through the door. Like if a new person came in the house, it's important to me that you stand up and you greet. Like it's just a thing that is important. It's a value that I have. My husband's family, I could walk in the door and everyone's just chatting. Nobody even acknowledges you really. I was like, hey, and I was just like, so it wasn't really that important to him. So we kind of had a middle ground, but he actually, I think what was saying, he honored that it was important to me, and I just love it's a value that they have. It's a skill they now have, how to greet people when they see them for the first time. It's just a little example of what like a difference in boundaries, and how you can meet somehow as a family.
Oh, can I add something really quickly that because I love how she talked about expectations. Because everyone's expectations, you're right, that is like gray, and everyone's are different because they're coming from different backgrounds. So something that I have started using that I got from like an old like boss like years ago, but he was like, whenever we had new projects, he was like, he wanted everyone that were sitting at the table like to understand like what his done looked like. And so I have equated that. So like when I have like my daughter picking up her room, I have to go, like I do it for her. So I'm like, this is what done looks like for me. Done is those books are on the bookshelf. There's no clothes on the floor, because otherwise if I'm like, you can't, you don't get to put it on your chart if your room's not clean. Like she doesn't, like she goes in there, she does do it. But then I realized until I started doing the done thing, that I was like, no, your room's not clean. But for her, God love her, she was like, she went in there and did something and she felt like she was done.
Yeah, her thought of what done is was different than yours. And we see that all the time with our kids. I think a couple things I would add just with boundaries, because again, this has been just such an amazing conversation around them, because we could probably talk boundaries this whole time because it's such a huge topic for parents, is there's different types of boundaries, so I use the same image as a box often as well. I don't have the doors, but it's like the box can be this big in some situations for some kids, or it's got to be really tight. And so for me, the walls ebb and flow often. And particularly in teenage land, they really have to just, ideally you just don't have the rule boundaries per se. But I think of boundaries as stone boundaries and sand boundaries. So the stone boundaries are in regards to those values. What's super important, in the safety aspect, taking care of yourself, brushing your teeth. You don't run out into the street and get hit by a car. We have to learn those. So those are stone, those are not movable, but a lot of our boundaries actually have gray areas, like, okay, so bedtime, how many kids actually go to bed at the exact same time every night? You may go out to dinner or go play in the park and you may have some looser bedtime. And so we have to recognize that life is filled with gray. There's very little black and white in life. And so boundaries are more gray than black and white. Typically, they're not on off, except for those safety, I always hear the example, if your child has strep throat, you're going to get that medicine in them no matter what. That's a stone boundary. And so a stone boundary should have that. It's the energy you bring into the boundary. Because if we have wishy-washy energy, if we are not in alignment with the boundary that we say out loud and tell our children and are very clear with, they know that. And so they're going to push against it more and more. And so then maybe it's time to reassess. Well, is this boundary reasonable? Is it true anymore? Maybe we need to adjust the boundary. The child has proven time and again that they're ready for a little bit more leeway, because our kids are learning and growing too. And if we don't expand out those boundaries to let them explore in the next area of safety, how are they going to rise up and be their best self if we are in the controlling boundary? So that was just something I wanted to talk about. And then I also think of boundaries as loving boundaries. We often think of boundaries as rules, or, the kid may say, oh, that's mean, that's not fair. But if we look at them and really understand what boundaries we want to put into place, that it's coming from a loving space. Like, I am creating this boundary for myself because I love myself enough and I love you enough that I trust that you are going to be able to find your place with that boundary being held. And so it allows empowerment for the child as well. And so, boundaries are so big and so widespread that recognizing there are no hard and fast rules with boundaries. And I'm glad you brought up earlier, Irene, that conscious parenting is not a free-for-all. Boundaries and conscious parenting go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, because to be our best self, best I use in quotes, to be our most authentic self means to find out what is true for us. And that comes with boundaries and respect for ourselves. Because how can we respect another if we don't create those boundaries for ourselves as well?
I love that. And I think conscious parenting is recognizing that what's in our control is setting the boundary and holding the boundary. What is not in our control is our child's response to that boundary. Exactly. Never in the history of evers have there been a child that's like, oh yeah, great, it's time to turn the TV off, or it's time for bedtime, or we get one book. Like, they're not meant to like our boundaries. Yes. We are just meant to hold them. And when I give the two choices, if it is a sand boundary, my son will be like, well, I don't like either choice. I'm like, well, do you have another one to offer? And if it's a stone boundary and I don't, then I'll be like, I hear you. I hear you don't like other choice. I hear you don't like either choice. I'm okay with that. How can I support you right now? Like, it's being there for them in whatever their reaction to it is.
Yes.
Because in the beginning, they're going to have a huge release of like disappointment that you're holding this boundary. And it's also to say like, hey, is this actually what you're going to do? And we often think, well, then I have to give in to stop the emotional meltdown. But actually what I need to do is hold them so that they can feel safe in that, so that next time the disappointment might not be as big. But that's how they release their energy, by understanding. And as we do this consistently, so now when I hold a boundary, my kids know and have an understanding of what that looks like. That huge meltdown is reserved for like the big events. It's not every event. But when we're first setting them, we're creating this imbalance between, right? So their inner world, what they expect to happen, and then their outer world. Well, mom always used to let me do this, and all of a sudden she's not. So I need to create that balance. So I'm going to demand it and push for it and try to get it even more to try to get balance back. But what we have to do is recalibrate their inner world and their outer worlds by holding the boundary.
Mm-hmm. And we have to be kind to ourselves in being able to hold that pushback.
Yes.
Because I think so many times parents, they just don't want the pushback, but that is expected whenever anyone I shouldn't say anyone, but whenever a boundary is put up, like you said, we don't get to decide how they respond to it. And it can be a big reaction, but it's our job to go within and hold that and be in alignment, body, mind, and spirit, to say exactly what, I see you. I understand you're upset. I get it. I'm here for you. You want to get that out. I can hold it for you, but I'm not going to change this boundary because I love you enough and I love me enough to keep this boundary in place.
Yeah, and I think that where the wheels can fall off too, and is go back to the self-awareness of when you start to question yourself while they're trying to hold the boundary, like they're pushing back. I get it, I hear you, but then like that internal dialogue, like, am I actually doing the right thing? Oh my gosh, am I a really bad parent? Like that thought train that starts happening, right? And so the wheels come up like, well, maybe, and so you have to actually go within and convince yourself. Yes. You have to let yourself know that the boundary is good and solid and why you're doing that. Reminding yourself also, because I know that for myself, I've been like, oh gosh, maybe I'm being a little bit too hard, and because it gets uncomfortable, if that pushback keeps going as you're trying to hold that space for them. So that's something that goes back to that self-awareness and listen to what you're saying to yourself.
Exactly. And then sometimes actually we aren't in alignment with the boundary we thought we were in alignment with, or our child provides us information that we hadn't considered and be like, I hadn't considered that. Let's reassess this boundary together. And that's the beauty too, is with conscious parenting, because we're parenting with our child, not over them, that especially as they get older, but even with little ones, we can create boundaries together. I mean, an example, when my daughters were in high school, we didn't have a curfew. There was no need for a curfew because that way, right? Sometimes I want them home by 10, or sometimes 1 a.m. was fine, depending on the situation. So the boundary for that evening often would be, what's the plan? What's going on? What time do you think you'll be home by? Oh, we'll be home by midnight. You know what? There's XYZ going on tomorrow. Is there any chance? How about 11? And then, so we would discuss what boundary for this particular event, and sometimes they'd show up earlier. I'd get a call or a text, we're going to be 15 minutes late. Okay, great. Thanks for letting me know. Versus, wait a minute, we said this and I have to hold it. Stuff happens. We live in the country. They're behind a tractor on a road coming home. I mean, you just never know. But allowing our children to be involved in creating some of those boundaries gives them critical thinking, ability to have a conversation that, hey, let's negotiate. I want to understand your side. Now, here's my side. Can you understand mine as well? I mean, what an amazing process. But clearly, I mean, I hear you. There's been times where I have held a boundary and I know within me it is 100% what I want to hold, and the pushback, and it's just like, okay. Just hold the space, hold the pushback. Oh, wait, should I switch? No, I can't. This is true for me, but it's not easy sometimes.
Like clarity is so important going in. And there's been times where I've held off on holding a boundary because I wasn't sure what that boundary was for me. So I kind of let things go, and I would notice the frustration coming up. And I was like, okay, but what would work for them? What conversation can I begin with them so that we can address both of our needs and wants? Right? Because what I like to say, like, what they want, need, desire is not in conflict with what I want, need, desire. It's the solutions that we impose that can be in conflict. And when we can work collaboratively, I love that example, Tia, when we can work collaboratively and we both have buy-in to that solution, it addresses both of our needs, wants, and desires. There doesn't have to be the battle.
Right.
I think there's a piece to this as well, just for moms that have like younger kids. It's a little bit different. Just knowing that there's grace to be given to moms, because I think with littles, sometimes you drop some boundaries just because you're tired. And so I think that and I notice this a lot with because we have the kind of the same demographic in our community as I am. And it's like, I think there's a big component to that, to knowing like, you know what, it's okay. You can reset and recalibrate later.
Yes.
If maybe you're just going to stop doing that for now, and that's not a big deal. I mean, you'll just reset at a different time, but there's a lot of grace that needs to be given towards moms on this as well, just because it's not like, you know, I'm not perfect. I don't think anyone else on this panel is perfect. And we all just, you know, we all reset, and, you know, tomorrow's another day.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's really important. It's not just for moms of littles. I feel it's for every parent, you know, and I think the pandemic has really shown that particular. And screen use is up, you know, parents are doing what they can to move through this, and give yourself some latitude that it's okay. It's okay. And sometimes we do. It's like, I don't have anything left in me. I'm going to make sure that you are safe. And no, we will just reassess everything tomorrow.
Food, shelter, water, check.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing, no shame in that.
And sometimes food looks like something I never thought I would be okay with, but there's some days where it's just like, again, it's recognizing our capacity. And I love that you said that, Lydia. And it's also coming from a place of like being empowered, like, okay, you know what? I'm recognizing my capacity and I'm choosing to let that go, versus I'm failing. I'm such a bad mom. The guilt and shame that we go into when we feel we can't hold a boundary. I actually was just, you know, walking with the dog today, kind of reflecting on this, where I was like, I think what I see is like, I'm okay with where things are, but I think where my guilt still comes into play is I see so much of what I want to do, and I just don't have the capacity. And so awareness, coming back to all this conversation around self-awareness, it's like, okay, yeah, it would be great to be able to do all of these things. And this is what I'm choosing to focus on right now.
Yes. And there's a saying that I love, and I have literally lived off of, especially through this pandemic year, is that I can be okay with it now, but it doesn't mean I'm okay with it forever. Right.
Exactly.
So there's a lot, and you know, we're still kind of like figuring out like everything. We are like probably 80% away from where we were before the pandemic started, as far as like lifestyle and getting back. So it's like right now, like I'm still okay with some things that I need to set boundaries around, especially with like my kids. Like my 1.5-year-old son, like only likes to be carried by me. I mean, and it is suffocating me, but it's also like, I tried it for one day with the boundaries, and there was just too many tears and I was done. So, but it's like, I know it's not okay long-term, but I'm okay with it now because of capacity, like Irene was saying.
And it's not going to last forever, you know? And I think we're so hard on ourselves, and we expect all these things and to have all the boundaries and, you know, the food and everything, but we're human. We are human beings, and we are not superhuman. And just putting that role of super mom, super dad, super caregiver does a disservice to us. And there's no shame in saying, you know what, I'm okay with it today, but it doesn't mean, and I've done that with my kids before too. It's like, you know what, I'm going to give this one a pass, but we'll reassess later when I have more bandwidth, because, you know what, sometimes we don't have it in us, and that is okay. And that's the beauty with conscious parenting too, is we have self-compassion is a huge piece of that, and knowing that shame does not serve us. So how can we be okay with not being okay too? Because some days we're just not okay. We're not at our best, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then that also gives permission to our children to not have great days as well, and not have to be perfect either.
The mental movie that we make, you know, we talk about being present, right? We talk about where are you? Like, oh gosh, if this happens, then this is going to happen, and that's going to happen because I let this boundary go. Then they're going to do this, and they're going to end up on the playground being the bully. And like, when next thing you know, we're parenting our kids when they're 25 and they're only 5. You know, so really paying attention to where are you? Like, what is going on, and being like getting back to right here, right now. What do I need today? What do they need today? And just meeting that for now, and that's your boundary for the day. I mean, so it's so empowering to be able to do that and just recognize all the future movies that you're making that haven't even happened yet, that give so much guilt and shame and fear. It's really empowering when you can recognize that and bring yourself back.
Definitely. So how about we circle back to, we get to create our own parenting journey. And that's one of the added benefits of, we are creating our own experience, not the experience that our parents put upon us or culture. So who'd like to start the conversation of creating your parenting journey? And how empowering that can be. Anyone?
I'll go. Okay, so for me, mine kind of started with a place of, I think, recognition, where I think we all start, which is, I don't want to be like my mom. But then also taking it a step further. So I actually had this amazing experience like with my mom, and it kind of connected us in a way that, we haven't been connected with in years. And it came full circle for me with where I am in like my journey. And I realized with her, she had spent all of her parenting life, there's 5 of us, being so intentional to not be her mom while parenting that she doesn't even know who she is as a parent. So, and I'm saying this because I think sometimes we can get caught up on just focusing on what we don't want to do. And I think just by virtue of laws of attraction, we end up kind of doing more of that because we're spending all of our brain power and brain cycles on focusing on not what we want to be. So for me, like the next step was, what do I want to be? And I didn't have a clear concept of that. And it's definitely what's been led me to what I'm doing with Whole Body Parent today. And for me, I kind of tapped into something I naturally like learning. I like connecting. I like hearing other stories. I like connecting with other mothers and parents. And so for me, defining what I want to be and like my journey with motherhood is about getting information, hearing different stories, and then me kind of finding out what resonates. And a part of that was also like, I'm so glad that Claire mentioned the core values, because I sat down and I sat down and did my core values. And then we kind of sat down and did like what our family core values are. And it also helps us set boundaries around things. Cause I think in parenthood, like I was really overwhelmed, and I experienced postpartum with both my kids. With my daughter, which was my first, was the longest period of postpartum, and it was also associated with some birth trauma that I had. But with her, I was so new, and I was so misaligned. I literally thought I was going to be back in the office with this baby like on week 2. No, I literally thought this. I had employees that were on payroll still. I mean, it was like, I didn't know, I had no idea. So I think a combination of this misunderstanding and then also, I had like my mom, like mother-in-law, everyone coming in and trying to make these decisions and parent through us how they thought that, this baby was going to be parented. So I feel like for me, like the journey, and I'm still on it. I'm obviously like discovery is like forever, was kind of sitting down and really aligning with what my values were, aligning with the fact that I kind of had like a feeling of what I could gravitate to, but I also wanted to make sure like I was bringing things into my purview so I could see kind of what things would resonate and would work well with me. So I would say like the biggest pieces of that are kind of tapping in to myself, but also making sure that I am being introduced to new concepts and new things and new people and new stories. And also a sense of community with sharing with mothers. Just literally by the look of draw was put into this group of women right after I had my first first child. And I owe that group of women, I mean, everything. I wouldn't have had, I wouldn't be the mother I am today. And like, it makes me really emotional because I don't even know how that happened. I mean, literally someone put me in it. Mm-hmm. But I just doing it alone and like not having someone that's like kind of similar mindset and that support team and just like sincere, open support, right? And you can't always get that from family members that, you know, they have their own things coming into it, or someone that's so closely involved that you just need someone just kind of cheering you on through your journey, supporting whatever decision, just because it's you and because, you know, they value their relationship with you and they support you and they trust you. And I think those have been huge aspects of defining my journey.
Mm. Love that. Thank you for sharing, Lydia. Claire, you're unmuted. Tell us about your
I
parenting
love that
journey.
story. I love hearing parenting journeys. They're so inspiring, and it's just like, Lydia, the idea of the difficult relationships in family and whatnot. So I think my mom was definitely a difficult, challenging relationship growing up. The defining my motherhood journey, I always talk about that day that I got angry and my 5-year-old looked at me and I said, "Oh, I'm not having this." So that I talk about that day, but it was a journey. It wasn't that just one thing all of a sudden was done, right? It's a series of events that happened that kind of really turned that ship for me into a different direction. I would say the second thing that happened after that really began me this new journey for me was after that anger moment. It was probably, I don't know, 6 months later. I was having my husband was out and I was with my 2 boys. My youngest one was asleep, reading a book to them, and we go brush our teeth, and I look in the mirror and I'm like, I'm having a stroke. My whole right side of my face was drooping and paralyzed, and I couldn't smile. And it was just one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm home with my kids, what's going to happen to them? Like my life flashed, but turned out to be Bell's palsy. So the next day I went to the doctor and she's like, whoa, it's like a serious case of Bell's palsy. She's like, do you have any stress in your life? I'm like, 4 kids, 3 of them 5 and under, like, yeah, but at the same, but the realization then that she said to me, she goes, what are you doing? And I told her I was applying for nursing school. I was part of the MOPS organization. I was helping in my son's kindergarten class. I mean, realizing the expectations I was putting upon myself, what motherhood should look like, and doing all the things. She actually said to me, you can say no. And I'm like, I can. I mean, it was not something that I even realized. So it was that moment that I realized I could say no. And it was then being able to go, what do I want to say no to? And learning how to say no, and then getting comfortable with that, and then just moving forward and not doing all the things that everybody was doing, and just doing things that was important to us and my family and my kids. So that was really empowering, learning how to say no, and the beginning of learning how to set boundaries. I would say, so very much like you, Lydia. From there, I was home with my kids for 11 years, and I went to work at a housing counseling center. And it was there that I learned how to be mothered, because there was a group of women that were older than me, and I just watched the way they parented their kids, and that definitely impacted my journey for sure. They loved on me like I'd never been loved on, and I watched them love on their kids, and I was like, that's more of what I want, So having that like-minded group, the tribe, being able to receive love, in such a way that was authentic, was really a beautiful part of my journey. And I just, that was definitely the 3 catalysts for the biggest in my parenting journey, and defining it the way it is, and how I have the relationship now with my kids. Not perfect, but it's definitely so.
Yeah, so I will share a little bit more of mine. So I shared a little bit in the beginning how it just was all about control. And what I came to realize through this journey of defining my own motherhood was everything I kind of did or didn't do, all the action I took or didn't take, was based in this intense fear of failure. And it was the intense fear of not living up to the expectations. I don't even know whose, because it was just that I had learned to wear this veil of perfection or attempted perfection. And it was this journey of releasing myself from the weight of my mom's criticism, which I know was done from love. Like we all operate from what we know. And it was, criticism to help me succeed is what she knew. And I still remember I had a coach, and one time, we talked a lot about this, and I was driving down the road one time, or I was talking to my mom, and she said something, and it was like 30 minutes in. I'm like, oh my God, that was a criticism. She just it was like, holy cow. And then there was a moment where, my son, and we were having a party, and he sits at a table, and he's like 9, hey mom, I'll take like 2 pieces of pizza, whatever. And I'm like, okay, great. And I get it. My mom's like, you do everything for that. You do everything for that boy. You like wrapped around your finger. I'm like, and without hesitation and without like snottiness, or I was just like, isn't it wonderful that I get to take care of him still? And I just like, it didn't affect me at all. And so the journey for me has been releasing this need to live up to this expectation of my parents. And I realized a big part of that realization was pretty much the only time I would still get I would still get triggered was when I heard my mom's voice. They're walking all over you. They're walking all over you. You don't have control. Because to her, when I give my son choice and I negotiate with him and we collaborate on a solution, it's giving him what he wants. And I'm like, but why is that a bad thing? Like, why is that a bad thing? So it was really about finding my voice. And I can't say my relationship with my mom is perfect in that I still have, I have the capacity to stand up when I need to. There's still that going on. And it's a journey of releasing myself from those expectations so that I can be present with my kids. It's a journey of coming back to myself, where I like to say, when I work with clients, it's like this quantum self, our most authentic self, right? It's my, sovereign. I make the rules for me. It's my empowered self. It's my most loving self. And it's the self that's focused within, knowing that the answers are inside of me. And that has been primarily my biggest part of my motherhood journey, was coming back to those truths.
I love hearing the journeys and the stories. And with conscious parenting, I mean, it shows you that you get to decide. It's not just doing it because my mom did it or my dad did it. We get to question, go within, and determine what works best for us and for our children. And that's the beauty of one of the many of conscious parenting. My journey is similar a lot, especially with Irene, from the control, behavior. I thought behavior was a reflection of me as a parent. And I have two incredibly strong-willed, sovereign daughters who made it clear. In hindsight, I didn't realize this at the time, of course, but I found out I was having twins at 20 weeks. So right from the very beginning, they're like, you have zero control, because I thought there was only one baby in there, and then bed rest and NICU and on and on. But being an only child, I didn't understand siblings, let alone identical twins, and the challenges and joys that come with that for their own beings, not necessarily for me, but really for their own challenges of looking across the table and seeing themselves reflected back at them. But my journey really was exactly that. It was returning to my authentic self. And I'm still uncovering and still finding out pieces, and I will do that until the day I die. And that's the beauty of conscious parenting, conscious living, being more authentic, is that it never ends, because there's always opportunities to learn more and say, you know what, that worked for me 5 years ago, but now it's not my truth anymore, because I've figured out a little more. And being able to model that with my children, collaborate, work with, listen, connect, and shifting out of that control into connection. We can talk about connection next and at the end of our time together, because the journey is not easy, and it's not about perfection and being a perfect parent. In fact, I don't want to be a perfect parent anymore. I did, because that was my conditioning, and work hard, be the best, read, consume, understand. If that's not working, find the next thing that's working. But it's all been perfectly perfect and imperfect, because it's brought me to where I am today. And every day I wake up and, take the lesson, choose, how do I want to show up? Is it in alignment with my truth and who I am, so that I can model to my children that they can step into their own truth? And that the journey is not smooth. It's filled with bumps and mucky spots where you get stuck for a while, but there's no shame in that. It's the unfolding. And that's conscious parenting to me is an unfolding. And that's what my journey has been to be. So we've got about 15 minutes left. I'd love to end the conversation talking about connection, because that comes up a lot with conscious parenting, that we are parenting from a place of connection, not control or, behavior-based. It's about connecting with our children as they are and honoring who they are. So maybe we can start out with just, what does connection mean to you? How do you know what it is? Because I've had that a lot with people. Well, what is connection? I don't understand it because they've never experienced it. Until you experience that connection, it's hard to describe. So who'd like to go first, or I can pick someone and we can go in a circle. Anyone? Claire. All right.
Okay. That's a big question, isn't it though? I mean, so I'm gonna okay. I think for me, connection, in the middle, I have a cares approach that I've created, and in the R is remember the relationship, so, but what does that even mean? So I think for me and we talked about this a little bit earlier already, but it really is separating myself from my child, I mean, and being, and not only that, but also separating whatever the situation might be. Maybe they miss curfew, maybe they do something, but until I actually, and this is the way my brain works, be able to literally separate the three of them and then see them as the being in front of me, and understanding that their experience, what they're feeling, thinking, is literally different than me. It's not mine. It's not the same as mine. And being able to, just in that separation, I'm acknowledging myself and connecting with myself first, right? But when I can do that, the relationship just seems to come quite easily, because I want to learn more, and I listen more, and attune to them. But again, like I think with Lydia that talked about, it's not linear, because I can find myself getting back up into the sea and get triggered but just the consistent attunement to really what are they trying to say, and giving them that space to do so. And then it's this energy, you just feel it. It's kind of like there's this energy, you just feel it, and they feel it too. And it's, I can't really quite eloquently put it, but that's what real connection is, for me anyway. And it really is about separating. I think that's where it starts. Is separating you from them and allowing them to experience.
Love that, Claire. Lydia, how about you?
So for me, I completely agree with what Claire was saying. And I love, she just beautifully phrased it with like the separation, because I think it's hard, especially when you're so connected and it's all about the bond in the very beginning stage. And then you have to kind of let them fly. But for me with connection, I think it's about being curious and me asking more questions. And just like kind of Irene talked about, like a lot of what we learn here, it helps us in other relationships. I've noticed that just being curious also helps me like in all my other relationships as well. But I'll give you an example, like with Nova. So anyone who has little kids that is listening to this, Play-Doh is really hard on carpets. So I was juggling a work call with the baby and her, and I told her she had the Play-Doh, and I told her not to put it on the carpet. The next thing I turn around, she is literally stomping it into the carpet. So in my mind, I just went into like, okay, great. I just gave her the playbook and she did what I told her not to do. And I was really upset about it. And I was upset about it. And it wasn't until a couple days later, I actually was talking to her about it. And I realized that she was trying to make a surfboard off of what she was watching on her show and surf on the Play-Doh on the carpet. And it was like me like having the curiosity to ask more questions about it, and then getting to a point of where I could understand where she was coming from. I didn't agree with the behavior still, but that allowed me to connect with her and kind of empathize with her position of it in a better way than if I hadn't have been curious about it. And I also like this story because I can't always connect in the moment. Like we talked about, like, I think one of the biggest things for me for parenting, conscious parenting, whatever it is, just parenting in general, also dealing with people, is not responding while you're kind of being in that reactive state. And And it doesn't come naturally to me. It's definitely something that I've had to learn in my adulthood. My husband actually enforced a 24-hour email response rule for me. So I was not allowed to respond to emails. I was fired up. I had to wait 24 hours, which actually is really, really good. It's helped a lot of relations. But it's the same thing with kids. And it is because you can't get to that kind of curiosity connecting stage if you are being emotionally triggered. But also something, I mean, like you said, Tia may not have had that connection moment, but everyone's felt it. It may not be with that individual kid that they have issues with right now. Or maybe it's been so many years ago that they can't even recall, but like we feel that connection. I mean, it is like you feel it when you're holding your kid's hand. You feel it when you're just sitting next to them watching a show. You have that connection. Sometimes it's hard for us to get over some behavioral things that we may not agree with, or we just are like butting heads and conflicting that we just don't even know how we can get in the moment to connection. But sometimes it doesn't always happen in that moment. Maybe you just come back, in a couple hours when everyone's cooled off, and then you get your connection. I think we're such an instant gratification society that we think that, we're having this issue and it's this discipline and everything has to come full circle right then, right? But that's actually not the case, nor is it healthy, nor is it realistic. So I think you can get that connection at a later time, kind of like I did with my daughter. And this was days later, not on purpose. Honestly, I'd just forgotten. And then we're talking. But it is a feeling that we've all felt, and we all know what it feels like. And it's so empowering. And I love what conscious parenting allows for more of those times, because I think for me, when I get curious and I'm trying to figure out what's behind whatever it is, why they're angry, what's the fit, then I understand, what's there, and I get to see a little piece of her that I didn't get to see before. So that's me. That's her allowing me to enter into her life on that level. And it does it. I connected more.
I love that. And I love what you brought up too, the important piece that it doesn't have to happen in the heat of the moment, because sometimes we can't. We're so dysregulated that it's not possible. And so to give ourselves that permission to take the time and then circle back and reconnect is so important, because it's the mirror neurons. We have to regulate ourselves, because we can't connect when we are in fight or flight and in a sympathetic mode. We cannot connect when we're sympathetic. It's not, we're not even connected to ourselves, because our body is in fight, flight, fidget, whatever your default mechanism is. So until we go within, self-regulate, get ourselves back into parasympathetic, align within, then connection can happen. Connection can't happen until we do it with ourselves. So I love that you brought up that it can happen days later. It doesn't have to happen in the moment. That relieves that pressure. And curiosity, curiosity is one of the best things, because it puts us into that space of, tell me more. I want to understand. So
so to build on this, idea, it doesn't necessarily happen. It's something we build over time. And the more we put our energy into building it over time, I still remember, like I said, my son pushes away. And there was a time, it was probably just in the last 6 months, where we were taking our walk at night and he held my hand. I don't think I moved my hand the entire walk, because I was terrified he was going to pull his hand away, because he's not somebody that allows that connection. But what I say about connection is, it's our capacity to be in that state of connection. It's our capacity to choose love over fear, over reactivity. It's not that we do it every moment. It's that we can come back to it. And I talk a lot about energy and energetic vibration with my clients. And when we raise our energetic vibration, we begin to live in a higher state of energy. Our capacity for connection is more available. When we're living in a low vibe state and we're in there, we don't just have the capacity for connection. So connection to me is connecting with myself first and foremost. It's recognizing that I'm in a low vibe state, and how can I support myself to raise my vibration where connection actually becomes available? And connection is, like I said, it's my capacity to be in a state of love, whether my child's available for that or not. It's my capacity to return to a state of love after maybe I've lost my cool for whatever reason. And like you said, I like to say about curiosity is the bridge to connection and the antidote to judgment. So when we can be curious, we can recognize our labels and judgments that aren't serving us, because connection is about, to build on what you said, Claire, it's the separation of seeing somebody else's experience as their own experience, completely separate from mine, and I can hold space for that. And it's my capacity to hold space. I mean, there were times when my son was in a meltdown and I'm in like full on like upper and lower body bear hug to keep him and us safe. And in my head, I'm like, I love you. I know you're struggling right now. Like, I'm having this whole conversation to keep myself in that state of connection, because like you said, Tia, when we are dysregulated, we can't choose love. Like, we can't be in that space of seeing him. All we see is how you're making my life hard. And that's disconnection, where connection is the ability to say, all right, then, this is what happened. It's a state of acceptance is what connection is to me.
I love that. And I mean, there's so many good bits that all three of you shared. The only thing I will add, because I think you touched on all of it so beautifully, is kind of building off of what you just said, Irene, is for how I help clients understand connection and how I've experienced the deepest connection with my children is it's not always in those beautiful moments of holding their hand, those, or playing the game. So many people, when I do workshops, what is connection? Oh, it's when everything is great. But honestly, the deepest connection I have ever felt is like what you had just experienced, Irene, and that you shared. It's in those tough, difficult moments that I'm able to stay regulated and be the safe container for my child to be dysregulated, and just be there and help them feel seen, heard, and worthy as they are in that moment, no matter how difficult it is. And it takes practice and time, that holding space, but holding space for big stuff is the magic of connection. And then all we crave is to be seen, to be heard, and to be accepted and worthy. And connection is the bridge. Like, I mean, I can't remember the exact words you used, but curiosity is the bridge. And it's so true. But I mean, my greatest memory of connection was, I know, Claire, I think you've heard this before because I've shared it in a workshop for your group, is at bedtime, teenage years, that's when everything comes out. And it was, my daughter would come in and she would start sharing stuff going on, things I'd never would have shared with my mother at that age. And I would have my big, like, kind of like what you were saying, Claire, I need a moment. And I would spew out advice or feedback, and she would look and she would leave the room, and then she would come back. 5 minutes later, she gave me that gift of coming back. And then I'm like, just stay here and hold the container and connect. And when it was an experience and a feeling that is, I can't not put into words, because it was an opening and my heart never felt fuller than in that moment. And she didn't need me to do anything other than be and connect. And that's the gift that we can give our children, along with all the other ones that we've been sharing today. We only have a few more minutes, so I want to thank Claire, Lydia, and Irene for being here on this panel. And before we sign off, if you have any last minute words, and how any of the listeners can contact you if they want to reach out and ask questions or work with you or anything like that. So Claire, why don't you go first?
My heart is full. My mind is blowing up from all the amazing things that were said. I'm like, I don't even know what I could possibly say as a last minute word, but other than that, yeah, this has been amazing. And I love hearing from all of you. And, again, I just go back to it. You just don't need to be perfect. Just be present and be compassionate and gentle and patient with yourself, mamas, because it's a hard job. But it doesn't have to be miserable. And I really have thoroughly, while my job as my own parenting journey has been challenging, I've really appreciated every moment of it, even the messy ones. So being able to be with yourself and your kids, even when they're messy, and love them anyway, because that's right, it's just the journey. So you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Claire Chetty Parent Coach. Email me at claire@ccparentcoach.com, or you can get all my information there. Would love to hear from you, but I really enjoyed this time with all of you. Thank you.
Lydia.
Yeah, no, I think Claire's right. There's just been a lot of things that have been said that were amazing already. I just want to thank all of you ladies for your time. And it's been incredible, and it's been an honor to sit here with you guys. I would say probably, the biggest thing is just giving yourself grace as a parent, kind of in the same vein as what Claire was saying, but I just can't emphasize that enough, because at the end of the day, it's hard, and it's like, it's you're on call 24 hours. You don't get a break. So just giving yourself grace and just knowing, you might have to change your expectations for yourself some days, just because you get to do that. You're in control. So might as well just love on yourself more and make it easier. So you can find me at Whole Modern Parent on Instagram, also wholemodernparent.com, and listen to the Whole Modern Parent podcast.
Lydia, Irene.
Yes, I can concur with everything that's been said. It's been such a joy spending this last 90 minutes with you ladies and having this conversation. I think we could all talk about all day. So the last thing that I will share to build on what's already been said is that if you can focus on, or I should say, the more you can focus on connection and calm in the hard moments, that's when you get to the moments of hand holding. That's when you get to the amazing, playing the game. It's not focusing on the good moments as this carrot you hold off in the distance that you're constantly trying to run towards. It's allowing yourself to just be in the moments of challenge is what gives you the moments of connection. So to find me, the best place is my website, irenemckennacoaching.com. From there, you can find the podcast, Thrive in Motherhood. You can find information on the membership, the Blissful Mom Collective, as well as my course, Finding Your Bliss, and connect with me. So that would be the best place to reach out, as well as social media links.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And I think the last thing I would there's so much said. I don't even know if I need to add anything other than, we're not meant to parent alone. And so reach out to people for support, join groups. Lydia shared how that was so helpful for her at the beginning when she just became a mom. Claire, you talked about also having that experience. I know I've had that experience as well. And we're not meant to parent alone. So it's okay. Find your people, find where you can feel that love and that support, and know that people can support you through your journey, because we're all here for each other. And it truly does take a village and a community. And I just really appreciate all three of you joining us, and all the people who were here live and watch this recording later. So, you can find me at my website, tiafagan.com. I also have a podcast called Masks Off. It is not parenting related. It's more, we talk parenting at times, but for the most part, it is really about peeling back the masks we wear, questioning our conditioning, and becoming more and more our authentic self each day. And just having real and raw conversations of the ups and the downs, and how we are not perfect, even if we have a perfection mask that we have worn over our life. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook at tiafagan.coach, and on Clubhouse at tiafagan. So I look forward to the three of you again at another time. It was so nice to have this space with all of you. And thank you to Amplifying Her Voice for this Mother's Day Summit, because it's an amazing event, and we highly recommend checking out some of the other sessions as well. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.